Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first. This is the first panel, isn't it?
First panel.
The first panel of the Windup Watch Fair. I'm Kathleen McGivney. I'm the CEO of RedBar, which is the world's largest watch collector community. I see some of our community in the room, of course. We just finished our. This is the last stop on our global meetup for this week, and we thought it would be only appropriate to convene here with our friends from Windup, or from Worn and Wound at Windup. So, with that said, I'm going to have each of our panelists introduce themselves, and after you tell us your name and what your role is, please tell us what your Grail watch is. So I'll take it to Blake.
Okay. My name is Blake Mallon. I am one of the founding partners and CEO of Worn and Wound. And my Grail watch, I was telling you this before the panel that I hate that question because I never have an answer.
That's a good answer.
Yeah, I just don't have an answer. I mean, I think we joke in the office that my guilty pleasure watch is the Rainbow Daytona, which does not fit my personality whatsoever, but I would love to have that watch at some point. So I'll just stick with that. Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
I actually like that you hate the question, though, because as watch collectors, we all have probably ever-changing Grail watches from day to day. So, Ben?
So I'm Benjamin Grion, and I'm the co-host of Wrist Check podcast. And I have to mention two watches for my Grail watches because I hold them both in the same regard. It's a Patek 5208R and an FP Journe Astronomic.
Both excellent choices.
And both very complicated like me.
Right, Lee?
My name is Lee Candela. You probably know me better by my Instagram handle, Brodinky. I also co-host the Wrist Cheese Radio podcast. Grail watch, I'm kind of like Blake. I don't really love this question because they're always changing. And I always think like modern watches, vintage watches. I think modern, I'm still hooked on the Sedna Speedy. There's something about that tone of gold that really gets me, and I don't really have many precious metal watches, and for some reason that one just really strikes me. And vintage, I always go back to the old Tudor snowflakes. The patinaed out blue dial kills me every time. So I think I'll stick with that for now. Tomorrow, ask me again, it'll be different.
And Sneh?
Hello. I'm Sinead Dewan. I'm the founder of Dewan by Design. I'm an event planning company. And my holy grail, I'm sorry, Blake, I also would love a Rainbow Daytona, but I'll settle for a yellow gold Nautilus.
It's the right choice.
You know.
Can't go wrong with that.
I like that you'll settle
Yes.
for a yellow gold Nautilus. My Grail watch is a Gronefeld Remontoire. They sold out. They're never going to make them again. Still want one. So, all right.
Just make a phone call.
I know, right? Like I can just call them up. I'll call them up from the stage. So the theme of this panel is community through collecting. As I mentioned, we just finished our global meetup, which is the RedBar community. Lots of people came from very far away, including Copenhagen, right in the front row. And I think that we wanted to touch on the fact that, like, this hobby, we all love watches. We all have different grails. We all have different collections. But we all come together through this shared love of watches in this hobby. So to that end, I kind of want to talk about how we all know each other, right? This group of people are all people I have met through watch collecting hobby. So I'd love to hear from each of you, and whoever wants to chime in. How has community, the people that you met through collecting, affected your collecting habits? Like, have you met someone that had a watch on that you've never seen in real life that then suddenly made you want it? How has interacting with people in the community affected your collecting? And I think, Blake, we've known each other for a very long time. You've been coming to RedBar meetups for a long time as well. And through those and through your activities with Worn and Wound and Windup Watch Fair, you come across tons of watches all of the time, and you come across lots of great people. So how has that affected you?
Sure. No, that's a great question. I mean, going to RedBar in the early days, especially when I hadn't had a chance to see very many watches, definitely contributed to my obsession with certain pieces. I remember going and seeing Bill's Pelagos, and just picking it up every RedBar and staring at it and thinking, like, I have to have this. I can't afford it, but I have to have this. And then eventually I got one. So that definitely contributed to my collecting. And yeah, I mean, I think that, through Worn and Wound and Windup, like you get to know everyone behind the brands. I'm personal friends with a number of the people upstairs. And I think, and to be totally candid, it does make me want to own their watches more. It means something more when I can own something from a friend and I know a little bit more about what went into it. So yeah, it's a big part of sort of what interests me about watches these days, for sure.
How about you, Lee? Has there been anything that's like through the community and the people that you've met, including online, because you're very active on Instagram, and you do, some Instagram lives on Friday nights sometimes that are a little drunken,
Roasting everybody.
a little drunken. But how has that, especially, given that you have both an in-person and an online relationship with the community, has that affected your collecting?
Yeah, so I think that's probably a pretty unique aspect of my own collecting journey, I guess you'd call it. It started out, I have two very close friends that sort of ushered me into watches. So we've always had a very tight knit bond. These are guys that I grew up with, like best friends. And it just so happened one day I said, I kind of like watches. And they're like, we're kind of already into it. And, let us show you the ropes type of thing. Right. So that was like its own little microcosm right there. Then branching out online, you look for more people to interact with. And it's kind of just something you stumble upon. Like I was like, I don't know if there's a community. I was like, I like Instagram. I'll check it out. You start searching hashtags and things. Now you're like building relationships with people. And I'm not even talking about right now. I'm talking about when you're just starting out. You start to get to know people's collections. Like you'll see a wrist with a specific watch. And you're like, I know that person. It's kind of neat. And then you start, branching out, buying, selling, trying new watches. You start making friends at events. Then you start going to the shows like these. I mean, I've been coming to Windup for years now, and I remember when it was at Chelsea Market and just meeting like you said, the people who kind of run the brands and everything. It's just a different experience, and it gives you kind of a new take on things. And I guess when you start to have a little bit of a presence, like now, it's like more of a two-way street where I walk in and I see Mike Pearson from Zodiac, and he's like, hey, it's just neat. And like Blake said, you want to sort of support those people, and you want to own their products and interact with them and show other people what good they're doing. So it's sort of been like a really big spectrum for me personally, but all positive. I mean, it's been a wild ride. I mean, I'm sitting on the stage at Windup, which is like still very surreal for me. I don't know about anybody else.
So yeah, I think it's great, and obviously like you and I connected through Instagram, and
Yes.
that's how that all happened. We met literally because I replied to one of your memes.
Yep.
And because they're very funny, but the thing I like about that, and we'll touch on it later, is that you don't punch down. Your humor is it's never mean. So I like that about this. So that's part of the reason why I invited you to participate. Sneh, same question for you as far as community affecting your collecting. We met through Watch Femme, through the women's watch community, and immediately became like immediate friends. It was pretty great. But you were already collecting at that point. Has your interaction with RedBar events or the Watch Femme community affected your collecting habits?
I think it's opened up my mind to a lot of micro brands I've never known about. It also allowed me to be comfortable with maybe pushing my style a little bit, because my watch collection really comes from style, because fashion is my background. So knowing that I can also connect with like-minded women like yourself, and talk about fashion and watches at the same time made me feel comfortable in a way that I've not felt before. And it also allowed me to learn more about, the fact that I am into more feminine designed watches that are colorful, maybe, more that I've never seen before, because I've never shopped for something like that. It was never something that I thought was, I don't know, not accepted, but I didn't know where my style was evolving. And I think as I've gotten older and I've met people, it's allowed me to open up about it and be quirky and, nerdy about it, but at the same time, have some timeless pieces and grow. So I've loved it.
Amazing. Ben, this is also because you're in the industry as well. You get a lot of really interesting and fantastic pieces that come across, come into your path, right? But, you also are a big part of the community, and you have the podcast that you guys started during pandemic. How has that, especially the podcast and interacting with the people that are your listeners, has that affected your collecting habits?
Yeah, so the podcast's only been going on for about 10 months now, 10, 11 months. And if it's shown me anything and taught me something, it's mainly two things: is that I, as a person, know a lot, but I also don't know enough. So seeing people and meeting people and just not even seeing new watches or things I've never seen before, but understanding new perspectives on the same things that I have a perspective on, and not necessarily changing them, but opening my eyes, has just taught me that everything's different for everyone, and there's different knowledge and there's different feelings that you can associate with the same object, and that's priceless. It makes me feel good about just being a part of this and meeting new people and just having more people come in.
That's great. I have another follow-up question to that. So as you've been interacting with the community or with people in the industry, meeting people who are making watches, I know that one of the reasons that the Gronefeld Repertoire is my grail is because the Gronefeld brothers are such lovely people, and they're more than happy to sit down with you and explain every minute detail of the movement of their watches and all of that. So there's a personal connection there. Is there any particular personal connection that you've made through watch collecting that 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 really stands out in your mind? Not necessarily that makes you want to buy a watch or anything like that, but just anyone you've met through collecting or in the industry that really just kind of stands out to you as someone that's super memorable and actually really important in your life.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that comes to mind is the whole team at Oris, to be honest. VJ, Josh, Rolf, Phil, Anna, everyone there is like, they're all genuinely good people. What they want to do with the brand is also amazing. How they get behind all these causes and proceeds go to those causes. And the first carbon neutral company in the world is amazing. They really care about the environment. They give back to Holstein, where all their watches are made. The community in Holstein, most of them work for Oris, and then they also sell products that you can only find in Holstein in their factory. So they're giving back and they're representing the brand and everything that they partner with in an amazing way.
Anyone else have memorable folks you want to call out?
Well, I mean, I have so many, I think, including you and all the people that I get to meet. I think, my business partners, Zach, who I knew in college, but I didn't know James, my other business partner, until we started the company, and he reached out to us, and we all kind of got along, and he's incredibly close to me at this point. But I think, I think that I have a very strong affection for a lot of the people who are upstairs, because you get to really see what goes into the brand and how much they care about it. And especially when you start doing limited editions, you've done them. They don't have to do that. They don't have to partner with you. It's beneficial to both of you, both of your businesses, both of your brands. And that's a very generous act, I think, getting involved in a project like that. So really with everybody we've worked with, it's just, I don't take those relationships for granted, and I appreciate them greatly.
Great. Sneh, I have a question for you. You said in a recent interview that all your watches have marked important emotional points in your life. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you see watches kind of relating to your personal journey and like just your life?
Yes. Every watch I've ever owned has tied into a memory. So when I got married, when I turned 21, when I graduated high school. So every part of that has somehow been related to a watch and either been gifted or I've been gifting a watch at that time. And so I think that it's allowed me to, and again, it evolves as I get older, as I mature. And I think that has opened up my eyes to other brands. And but also building that personal connection to me is so important. I mean, it ties back into my job. I'm an event planner. I bring families together. And for me, that is so important. And so a watch is always somehow part of that. And so even I get questions all the time like, oh, what should I get as a wedding watch for my husband? Or what should I buy my wife as a wedding watch? And I think that is so memorable. I mean, I bought my husband a watch for our wedding. So that, ties back, and that's always going to be a part of, his collection. And we're always going to remember that. And I think that to me is how I've always started my journey, and it's also how I build my relationships. That's how I have my relationship with my dad. I wear his watch. That's what he gave me when I turned 21. So I think it passing it down and telling a story is really important to me, and that's how I build it.
Great. I'll open that to the rest of the panel. Is there any, particular connections that you have with watches, like Sneh was talking about, with weddings or any other moments in your life that have been, impacted or are associated with a watch?
most of my purchases are impulse, so probably not. But it's even the watches I don't have. It's like I see it and it's like, oh my god, I want it. Like that feeling that just hits you. That's really what it is. Like even like I'm wearing an OP right now, and that was I didn't want this. I didn't ask for it. I asked for a completely different watch. I asked for a yellow 36, and they got rid of it. And then the guy who was supposed to get it for me was like, shit, I feel bad. Like, I have this, though. And I was like, yeah, fuck it, I'll take it. That's really how that went.
I love that. But, you know, the thing is, like, when I ask the question about Grail watches, the answer isn't always, I have a Grail watch. The answer isn't always, I have an emotional connection, or I have a, you know, like, I have some watches in my collection that are definitely pieces that I have an emotional connection to because they're associated with a specific time in my life or some, you know, some other milestone. But there's other watches. I like the one I have on today, which is a Brew. I have a lot of Brew watches because John Ferrer is a delight, and he makes amazing watches. But the personal connection, you know, it's not the specific watch; it's the person behind the brand. So that, but you know, there's still a personal connection there. It's just not like I didn't buy that watch because it was my birthday. I bought that watch because it was cool.
Yeah.
So, Lee, do you have anything along those lines?
It's funny. I almost have like another side of the coin to this is that I have personal connections with models that I've given as gifts to people. Like there are people, coworkers, friends, family members that have either come to me and told me, oh, I'm a little curious about it, and they had something coming up that, you know, should be remembered or something like that, or they're just, hey, can you help me pick something out that I might like? And now when I see that, I'm like, oh, that's so funny. Like I started you out with that, and now you see where they've gone, and you know how it is. It's a little bit of a gateway situation there. And next thing you know, they got a whole watch roll full. But
Yeah.
I have coworkers now that were just strictly smartwatch people or whatever. And they just every day would come in and they would ask me little questions. Hey, what's up with that strap? What's up with that? What does that colored thing do on there? And little by little, next thing you know, they're like, I made a purchase again.
I mean, I'm pretty sure that all of us on this stage and probably all of us in this room have done that to someone in
I
our
mean,
lives.
you know I'm a bad influence.
You are we're a bad influence on each other. I'm like, not just in watches, but like shoes and other stuff. So I want to shift it a little bit to talk about staying connected to the community. You know, even though everyone wants to think the pandemic is over, it's still lingering. But we did have that period of time when it was like complete lockdown. We couldn't see each other. We were, you know, staying connected in other ways. So what was your go-to way of staying connected to the watch community during lockdown? And then how has that shifted since the world started to open back up? Are you seeing, you know, are you still doing more hybrid things? Is there some digital? Is there some in person? How did that go for you? Oh, Blake.
Sure. Yeah, I don't want to keep being a contrarian, but I felt really disconnected, and I don't think that I personally ever figured out a way to really properly connect with people during the pandemic. I think that was the hardest part about it, and I think, you know, as we started doing windups again, and we did our summer pop up and stuff like that, you know, I was excited to do them, but then once I got to see everybody and interact with everybody, it just reminded me how important those real life in person connections are. Like we did a virtual windup, and I think everybody was happy with it, but it just wasn't the same, you know. And I think, you know, you continue to do business with people across the country and across the world over Zoom, and it's nice to see them, but it's just not the same, you know. So yeah, I somewhat unsuccessfully tried to stay in touch with people, but it's only really been since we've been doing in-person things that I feel like I've really connected with the community. Yeah.
I actually want all of you to answer this question, but Lee specifically, because again, you've got Brodinky, you're participating in a lot of IG lives. Was that something that, you know, kind of helped you feel connected?
I think so. Well, that was how that even got started. Like I wasn't familiar like on a friendly level with any of those people. I just kind of stumbled in one night, as you have, and you know, next thing I know, they're like, "Hey, why don't you come on?" I'm like, "I don't know, not that many people like know me, and I don't know, but I'll do it." And now it's kind of a regular thing. It stopped for a little bit, but it's back to being a regular thing. But during the pandemic, that was like we looked forward to Friday nights because we were just like, okay, we'll get on, we'll have some scotch or a beer or whatever, and we didn't always talk watches. We just, you know, shot the breeze and had fun. It was just that social connection that you missed. I mean, you still saw your friends, but not often. You know, you had to stand 6 feet from your coworkers, so it was like it was just a sorely missed part of life, I guess. So yeah, I guess having the account was a big, uplifting part of my life at that point.
That's great. How about you, Ben?
So during the pandemic, I wasn't so involved with the watch community. I would say, like, I wasn't going to meetups or anything like that. But then my main way of staying connected was Instagram, and I think through Instagram, it kind of it made us want to do it more, right? It was like, if we're on Instagram and we're all connecting now, and it really showed me how much smaller this world is, especially on the internet, because then everyone's like Lee said, you're on IG Live with like 15 people that you've like it being in DMs before, and it's like, I've never spoken to you outside of this, but now we're here watching Lee be silly on Instagram, right? So and then when the quarantine was over and we all came and we had meetups in person, it was like, I know you, but I've never met you, and that's a crazy feeling. So then when you meet, you connect on things that go much deeper than just watches. Watches are just a gateway.
And
Say.
I agree. Instagram was kind of the way that I think connected me to Watch Fam. And do you guys remember Clubhouse?
yeah.
Oh,
Like the meetups on Clubhouse.
R.I.P. Clubhouse. I mean, I think it still
Is it still
exists.
there?
It's still a thing, but it's not.
But like, we were really
was, like-
active on it for a while
Yes,
because
that
you
was-
couldn't do anything else.
Correct. That was one of the other ways to connect on socially and
They definitely cashed out during quarantine.
yeah. But that's how I it was nice. I mean, I felt like it was a double whammy because I wasn't doing events for a very long time, and that was my community too in the beginning. And so coming out, or not coming out, but kind of venturing out a little bit after the pandemic, it was nice to meet people in person. And I'm a hugger, I'm a feeler. I love kind of having that. So for me too, it's like not having that, I felt lost. So I think that having Instagram help kind of open up, more ways to connect, and then eventually coming together like this, it's been great.
No, I was just gonna say, and just big shout out to the entire industry, media, watchmaking, everybody, because during that time, I don't know what I would have done with myself. I know it was probably more slightly opportunistic that there seemed to be new drops like every single week, but I mean, it kept all of us so entertained, and I mean, obviously myself, I had a little extra material, which was nice. But just being able to just shoot pictures back and forth all day long. Look at this. It was insane, and I don't know what I would have done with myself during that period if not for everybody involved.
Yeah, I think that was the interesting thing that we saw during that time, especially was as we all know, the Swiss watch industry in particular has been very slow to adapt digital things. And then all of a sudden, they all discovered Instagram Live and Clubhouse and Zoom and stuff. And we started to see a move towards less of that sort of time of year bunch of releases. They would do things at SIHH and Basel World, also RIP. But we would see big releases a couple times a year, and then we started to see a move to people releasing things a lot more. I think partially because they were like, why do we need to schedule? We're not going to have an event, so why don't we just release this now and not get lost in the noise of 700 new releases on one day, and all of the people are just reposting Rolex.
Yeah. things get lost in the sauce that way.
Yeah, people with that. So stuff stopped getting as lost because we were all just at home glued to our screens, and
And I think we got to give a shout out to the indies and the micro brands really during
sure.
that time, because they're so small that they survived that, and then B, like, they kind of been on that because they've always had a bigger interaction with the watch community than most of the big brands have.
that's actually true. That kind of dovetails into the next set of questions that I have. It is a good time to talk about that specifically, especially at this show. A lot of pretty much most of the brands that are exhibiting here are smaller brands that have that like kind of, they got the moxie. They're like on the platforms and they're talking directly to their customers, and they're really involved in the watch community. And many of them are watch collectors themselves whose passion was so overwhelming that they decided to create their own brands. So for you, Blake, you've been active in the watch community for a long time, and as a business with Worn and Wound, how has your journey? I mean, obviously we've touched on your connection with the brands that are exhibiting here and your relationships with those brands. But how about connecting your audiences? Like you guys have a distinct audience of people who read your editorial, and people who are, of course, here at the fair. But how has that? How's your journey evolved? And how has that also paralleled with your personal relationships with other collectors?
Sure, yeah, no, I think that's a great question. You know, I think Windup is like the most obvious manifestation of our community. It's literally people coming together in a community. So it kind of makes sense. And I think, you know, when we started Windup, we had no idea if anybody wanted to come. And, you know, we did it at this little storefront on Worcester Street. There was a giant hole in the sidewalk in the front.
Man, I remember that. It was kind of scary to walk in there.
Yeah, it was frightening. And, you know, there was a line out the door and people were in there all weekend. And that was like, that blew my mind. It blew all of our minds. And then same thing when we went to San Francisco. It's like, I don't know if people want to come do an event. You know, it just didn't sort of compute necessarily until we saw it. So I think doing the event in all these different cities like really has helped solidify in my mind just how broad the community is. Like it definitely is a small world and you end up sort of like speaking to the same people and developing these close relationships. But it's also like every corner of the country, I feel like you could have a watch event and a bunch of people would come together who maybe don't know each other and sort of find something in common. So yeah, I think that's sort of been the primary journey for us. And I think, you know, as it relates to my collecting, I think, yeah, I just think trying to keep more of an open mind. I think, you know, Windup has always been very curated. Worn and Wound has always been very curated, very much in sort of the vision of like, you know, primarily Zach Weiss. He's really sort of the creative leader at the company. And I think one of the things that Windup's really great at is we'll have brands that maybe in our minds don't really fit the sort of Worn and Wound aesthetic, but then people love them at Windup. They do super well. They learn so much about their audience. So I think Windup and sort of seeing people's reaction to different type of watches really helps me sort of like broaden my horizons for sure.
Yeah, I love that. So for the rest of the panel, you know, how does like attending something like a Windup or a Watch Time or any of the other various and sundry events that are especially multi-brand and organized, how do those affect, you know, your collecting perspective?
It makes me want to just know more about the people that are there. Like there's so many brands upstairs that I've never even seen or heard of before. And before I came back down here, I was doing the lab, and I was like, I want to find out everything I can about everything here, right? And then not just necessarily the product, but the people behind it. Because I think once you understand the people behind it, you get to understand the why of the product, and that kind of brings you closer to it.
Yeah, no, I think Ben nailed it. I think just seeing people's passion for things really speaks to not only where the product is coming from, but probably how the product is made itself. And even there are brands that I found at Windup that either I can't get my hands on normally because nobody really has them, or they're just kind of spread out and sparse. But I remember like I found things like Youngins, Autodromo, and I picked these up and I was like, these are really cool. And like they've stuck with me, and I actually have an Autodromo on now, but just those are watches that when I'm like, maybe it's time to buy another watch, like I got all those tabs open in my phone. I'm like, which one is it going to be? But like, they are there. And like, they would have never been there had I not come to something like this.
Agreeing with Ben, it's just learning the story. Once you know the story and you connect with it, I think that is the most like impactful thing for me. And it just makes me want to connect and learn more and open up and eventually buy that watch.
It's really, if you don't mind, it's really great to hear you guys have that feedback about the event, because like a big piece of it is that we want brands to be on a level playing field. Yeah. We want someone to walk in who potentially knows about watches or doesn't, to see a watch from a company that started 6 months ago and a brand that's been around for 100 years and evaluate them strictly on the merits of how it feels in their hand. And it's just great to hear that that's at least partially being accomplished. So thank you.
So I have another couple of questions, and then we'll open it up for a Q&A. So I want to talk a little bit about not just the in-person community, but the online community, specifically the meme, from memes, the meme perspective, but also just kind of, you know, how that online community interacts is a little obviously different than in person, but because people are hiding behind a screen, and they're hiding behind a screen name and not using their real name, unlike you, Lee, who, you know, you do make your name public, but there's a lot of accounts that just are, there's no one's face, there's no one's name, and they can post some pretty awful things. How do you think? How do you deal with that kind of stuff? Because I'm sure even in your comments, you probably have seen some kind of shitty stuff. How do you deal with that, and how do you think that the kind of community should deal with that? And Blake, I want to open this to you as well, because it literally doesn't matter if you post like the best watch ever in the world. There's going to be someone in the comments. There's always going to be someone that's hating on something, because someone is going to be like, I hate date windows, even if no, seriously, but I want to start with Lee on that, because you obviously make memes, but you also pay attention to that side of things. So I'd like to hear from you.
Sure. Yeah, there's a very vast world out there, and those were things that even when I started out, I'm not going to say I probably wasn't guilty of that myself, and I've definitely through time curtailed that. I mean, I think you come to realize it when you first get on social media. It's a lot different than when you've been there for a while and you realize that there are always other people on the other end, right? There's always somebody else on the other end of whatever, the picture, the comment, whatever. So I think there's a bit of maturity that kind of weaves its way in there. But I do have to say, I think the community does a pretty good job of like policing itself a little bit, because I don't know. I think everybody in this hobby I think it's a little bit of a mature hobby. So I think that people don't usually give in to the bait. They don't always take the troll bait or the attacks personally. They know somebody's just trying to get a rise out of them or leave a controversial comment to get attention. But other people will, I notice, frequently step in and just say like, why are you even following this account if you don't like it? Like, why are you commenting on this brand if you don't like this brand at all? Why are you even browsing its posts? Like, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. But yeah, I don't know if there's a great way to necessarily combat it, but I think people do a good job of just not giving into it. I think that's the way to go. And I also think like that's sort of something I've tried to stake my name on as I guess I've matured in this hobby space or whatever, is that I never wanted to ever, like you said, punch down, especially on the smaller brands, especially on people who, a negative comment, a mean joke might make or break them. Like, you can really turn their name around or something, or just give them a negative stigma. I mean, you see the jokes about certain brands out there, and everybody likes to pile on. It's kind of like a little bit of a groupthink situation, but I never wanted to do that to anybody, because, at the end of the day, some people, that's their livelihoods. Some people, that's their pet project. They've sunk a lot of money into it. I know a friend who tried to start a micro brand, lost a lot of money doing it because it just never wound up manifesting into anything. So I personally never wanted to do anything on that level, and I think that's why, for some people maybe I'm a little more vanilla nowadays, but I can live with that. I can look myself in the mirror, I can sleep at night, I can put my name on the internet and not worry about somebody finding it or looking for me one day. So I'm okay with that, I guess.
Yeah. So Blake, how do you guys deal with that? I know again, we've seen even some recent examples. I won't name it, but there's some on other channels from other places that where there's a 700 comment pile-on, and the post ends up getting deleted. But even with something that's more innocuous, it's like just a watch launch. I'm sure that there's always a hater. So how do you think? How do you guys deal with that? And how do you address that within the community? And what do you see from your community? Yeah. Do you see that kind of self-policing from your audience?
Yeah, I think when you're on Instagram, like, things are so much more open. I think in the comments on our blog, things tend to be a little bit more civil and sort of self-policed. I think we have we're pretty zero tolerance with negativity. Like, I think even if you're just being overly aggressive and communicating your opinion about something, it's just like, you don't need to be there. Like, you don't need to phrase it that way. For every incredibly aggressive comment someone posts, there could be 10 people who want to join the conversation, but they don't, because they don't want to get roasted. So, we're really trying to control that stuff. And yeah, I mean, honestly, there are times where I'm incredibly disappointed in people and how they behave, in the community, because it's so small. We all know each other, and they're real people. And I think, the incident you were talking about, I reached out to somebody who was really going in on it, and I was like, stop. There's a person, stop doing that. And they took down some posts, but it's surprising how far people are willing to go, because they don't always think about it as not being anonymous. They think they're
It's a crime
anonymous.
of passion.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think, and I think maybe to go back to the pandemic, I think people kind of forgot that there was another human being on the other end of that comment, right? Especially if it's an anonymous account and whatever, or something like that that's not associated with a human being's face, it's just, so I think people kind of have forgotten that a little bit, and maybe the return to in-person gatherings might help people remember that a little.
Yeah, we also, I can't speak to the exact editorial policy, but like we generally designate someone as the comment reviewer so that everyone else doesn't have to see the shit people say about them, because it's pretty brutal. So it's tough out there. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, I think that's so. I think maybe we'll leave that with a note for everybody. Just remember when you're commenting on the internet that there is a human being at the other end of that comment, and they're going to be reading that, and they have, people have feelings and emotions. Shocking. So we have a little bit of time for Q&A, but before we do that, I have one speed round question for you. You're at your ideal watch meetup. Like, envision the meetup of your dreams, and you see someone across the room that you've been dying to talk watches with. Who is that person, and what do you want to talk to them about? It's going to take a second.
Max Booser.
And what do you want to talk to Max Booster about?
Life. I want to know everything.
You want to talk about everything?
Everything.
I mean, well, Max is a delightful person and will talk to you about all kinds of stuff. Like,
That's on my agenda
Yeah.
this weekend.
You're gonna talk to Max. Max is great, and he's lovely. He shares knowledge. He's more than happy to talk to you about his design process and how he thinks when he's
That's
creating.
really what I want to talk to him about. Just design in general. It's like he posted something on Instagram today, which is like a clock, in someone's kitchen. It has nothing to do with anything MBNF related, but he liked it, so he posted it, and I can respect and appreciate that.
Yeah, I think that's what's great about a lot of the, particularly independents, but not even just independents, the people that are responsible for the design or the movement design or any of that. There's so many people in this industry that are willing to share their thought process and talk to you about it. They're just as passionate as we are as collectors, and they want to share that information. So I know that I stumped you guys. It looks like I stumped you guys with that question, but Lee, you said you have one, so let's go.
So, and this one I was thinking about, if I was at a meetup and I saw this person just hanging out there, and somebody who I know is into watches, who is a well-known celebrity. Bill Shatner is a big watch person. I've heard him on a number of podcasts that are not even watch related talk about how he just loves the fact that there's this little machine with all these inner workings, and he's just fascinated by it. And then he's gone up with Blue Origin, so he has an X33, he's got a space-flown Speedmaster. There's a lot there that I'd love to talk about. And then just, obviously, Star Trek and his whole, even his musical career. I want to know, does he know from what it looks like from our angle? And is he playing on that? Or is he thinks he is the bee's knees? I have to know.
All right, I like that answer. Snay, is there someone that you'd love to talk to?
It's fashion related. There's a editor for British Vogue, and her name is Sarah Harris, and she's this 6 foot tall woman with gray, naturally long gray hair. But what I love about her is that her style is so androgynous, but her watches are so just something that I would never, I guess what I thought she would put on. She has a Royal Oak, she has a Chopard, they're all so different. And I think that I just want to know what attracted her to those pieces. Because being in the fashion industry, you probably have access to everything. But she's picked such specific pieces that I'm interested as to what she relates to with that and how she got there and what made her pick it. It was interesting.
That's awesome. How about you, Blake? You've talked to a lot of people in this industry and the community, so this is probably a tough one
Who's
for
your
you.
favorite?
I'm not going to answer that question. No, it's great to be able to talk to all these people Mike France, founder of Christopher Ward is upstairs with a tremendous amount of, business and watch knowledge. I get to chat with him, the guys at Zodiac, all that stuff. I think it would be really cool to talk to the first person that ever read Worn and Wound. The first person that ever stumbled on the blog and see if they still read it, which I'm sure they don't. But I would like to talk to that person. How'd they find us? What'd they think? Are you a fan?
I love that, but I think that's great because your journey has been, Worn and Wound's been around 11 years.
Yeah, 11.
11 years. So that's that the journey you've gone from a very small blog to kind of an empire. So I think that would be great to, to see what that person thinks of the evolution of Worn and Wound. All right, we are going to open it up for questions from the audience. Does anybody have any questions for the panelists? Any questions about collecting, community? Yes, go ahead.
What would you guys like to see in terms of American watchmaking?
And the question was, what would we like to see in terms of American watchmaking? Anybody have opinions on that?
It's a great question. Yeah, I mean, there are definitely a bunch of people doing cool stuff in the U.S. I think, unfortunately, given the sort of way that Made in the USA is qualified, like it's really hard for someone to do a fully Made in America watch, and that might never happen, or at least not for a long time. I think it would just be cool for like American watches to develop like a truly unique aesthetic, like something that you don't have to know it was made in America, but you look at it and you're like, that's American watchmaking. I think that would be cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna piggyback on that. There's no true like aesthetic to a made in America watch. It's like, what does that mean, right? It's like like a lot of these brands, if you go back into their history, they have very unique looking things that you know that they did because they're from a certain place and it was done at a certain time. What would that look like for America?
Yeah, and I think obviously it's a little tough given the preference a lot of people have for Swiss made and all these titles and things like that. But also, a lot of watches have those characteristics. Like when I think Seiko or Citizen, I think sharp edges. It would be cool to have an American aesthetic and maybe a brand like a Shinola or something to come back to prominence. I think that would be neat if they can get that really going again. I mean, I don't think they make terrible stuff. It's just obviously, it's so hard because the industry itself does not necessarily make watches for the enthusiast. So they also have to sell watches on the rest of the spectrum as well. So it would be cool to see them maybe do a couple tweaks here and there and maybe aim some stuff at us that maybe we'll pick it up. I don't know.
Yeah, so I think I agree with you. The difficulty for the Made in the USA label is quite difficult because it's not like it's not like Swiss made where it's
Kind of Swiss made.
most of the stuff.
Maybe sorta.
Yeah, probably most of it. But in the U.S., it's a big challenge because of all the things having to be made in the USA, and we don't produce jewels like the American, like we just don't in the U.S. So you can't make a mechanical watch that's using jewels because then call it made in the USA because that part wasn't made in the USA. But I think we have a really great group of American brands that are, large, a lot of them are, micro brands. There's many of them here at the show. I love to see that surge, and I think I would like to see it continue. I'd like to see more passionate folks who love watches start up their own brands and continue the sort of momentum that the American brands have.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the audience? Yep.
Did you bring a time dropper?
I did not.
I'm
tempted.
assuming is there an inside joke about the time grapher that you want to share with us?
Not really. Just.
We have one in our office. I can bring it.
I was
if
gonna
you
say, I'm
want.
sure these guys have one.
Any other questions from the audience? All right.
Are there plans to expand Windup, say, to other countries, like to come to Canada or kind of thing? And Blake, you never told me how much I owe you for the infrared.
Okay, so the question is are there plans to expand Windup to other countries like Canada? I know some Canadians in the house, and let him know how much he owes you for the Uber.
Sure. So I have a big announcement. Kidding. So yes, I mean, we would love to. We, pre-pandemic and sort of pre-Brexit, we were out in London looking at venues, and we would love to do one out there. There's a lot of cool spaces to do it. So, I think if we were to do another city, we're San Francisco, Chicago, New York. I think maybe 2024 would be when we really launch something different. A lot of folks mentioned Toronto as a city they would want us to bring the event. So I think the most likely first city outside of the U.S. would probably be London, would be my guess, because there's also so many great British brands. There's so many upstairs, and I know that they want us to come out there, and I know they would be hugely supportive. But there's also places we want to go in the U.S., like down to Texas and all over the place. So yeah, this is a big growth here. We're going to kind of get our bearings, do it one more time successfully, and then we'll look to grow beyond that point. Yeah. And you don't owe me anything for the Uber. It's fine.
All right, great. I think that's all that we have for today. So thank you for attending. We really appreciate you being here. And thank you to all the panelists for sharing all of your thoughts on watches and community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.